See.
Home builder D.R. Horton said orders for its homes slid 15% in its fiscal fourth quarter, and deal cancellations surged as higher mortgage rates pushed buyers to back out. But the stock of D.R. Horton is advancing today. D.R. Horton up by 3.6%. Redfin is shuttering its iBuying business and laying off workers for the second time in almost 5 months as the likelihood of a prolonged U.S. housing slowdown continues to ripple through the industry. Redfin shares today, they're plunging 15.7%. Recapping stocks lower, S&P down 64, down 1.7%, 10-year yield 4.16%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. Something I've been talking a lot about with my family, and that's all these common consumer products that we are using that end up having ingredients that are dangerous to us all. Related to that is the tiny lab that finds the actual danger in things like dry shampoos, sunscreen, Zantac, and more. That lab finding the problems is Valisure, and its CEO is David Light, who recently talked about the role his tiny lab plays.
The FDA does have independent review boards for drug approval, but again, they're just reviewing the data that was submitted to them by the manufacturers. So having as part of that independent review process an independent chemical analysis, not by a quote-unquote third-party laboratory, but by a private laboratory, I think is critically important. And the fact that Valisure, a new and relatively small company, can have found so many of these problems in such a short period of time, I think is fundamental proof that this is very much needed, and we're probably just scratching the surface.
That's the CEO of Valisure, David Light. This story, by the way, Bloomberg Big Take on the Bloomberg Terminal. It's reported by Bloomberg News healthcare reporter Anna Edney. She joins us via Zoom from Washington, D.C. Be sure, to check out the Bloomberg Big Take podcast at Bloomberg.com or wherever you get your podcasts, and check out the Big Take on Bloomberg Radio. That's weeknights at 11 p.m. Wall Street time. All right, Anna, tell us about Valisure, this independent testing lab. It's like a case, again, of kind of the little engine that could, the little lab that could, that's really kind of opening our eyes, consumers' eyes, to some really dangerous stuff that's out there. Who are they?
Yeah, I've been kind of, as I've been reporting this, thinking of it also in the sense of kind of a bit of David versus Goliath.
Yes.
They're a small lab in New Haven. It's just down the road from Yale University, where David Light, who we just heard, that's his alma mater, and they've got about 20 employees that are looking at things that what we're finding out is U.S. regulators at the Food and Drug Administration aren't keeping that close of tabs on. Clearly, the companies aren't keeping very close tabs on because after Valisure does testing and ends up finding dangerous chemicals in a lot of those products that you named, we see recalls pretty soon after, and sometimes stretching out even a long time after. And so their mission has been to look for things that, when you sit down and think about it, if you are kind of in this space, if you understand the science, maybe you would think to look for these chemicals. They might be potential contaminants in these products, but they shouldn't be there. Mm-hmm. And so they're doing a lot of these tests that clearly nobody else is.
Can I just say, I was an active user of Zantac, and then I didn't love this headline because I use dry shampoo a lot.
You and tons of others. It was out on the market for years.
Instant volume. I mean, the dry shampoo, not the Zantac.
Oh, sorry.
But right. Anna, I mean, you posed the question in the lead of your story, why are they outrunning regulators? And then lower down, you make the point that, I mean, we're not talking about a huge budget for the FDA, but an enormous purview.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the problems. Food and drugs is in the FDA's name, but they also oversee medical devices, tobacco, cosmetics, which your dry shampoo is a cosmetic. Valisure has found issues in drugs like Zantac you mentioned, and sunscreen as well, which is actually considered a drug. But the Food and Drug Administration's budget is about $6 billion. And so that's half of what you would see for the Environmental Protection Agency or even the Internal Revenue Service, even though they have this huge umbrella and so many, it's 80% of the products that we all touch every single day. The FDA is supposed to keep tabs on. What that ends up meaning is that they're trying to get these products on the market, particularly if something needs to have approval. And they're, in the pharmaceutical industry, at least they're paying user fees, about $3 million per application to try to get their products on the market, and pay the FDA to do these reviews. And there's just not a lot left over for what we call post-market surveillance, looking at things once they're on the shelves to see if there might still be problems.
Anna, it sounds like it's putting it's the pharmaceutical industry paying the regulator to kind of hurry along and get this approved. So maybe the process isn't so good. We're running out of time. This small independent lab, it's now in legal battles, though, with Big Pharma and even the FDA. So what's the likely outcome? Because it sounds like we need a company like this. Just got about 25 seconds, real quickly.
Yeah, it sounds like David Light, when he talks, is very keen to continue doing this kind of work. Just to be clear, the lawsuits aren't against Valisure. There are consumers who filed thousands of lawsuits against the big drug companies that made Zantac, and those drug companies are trying to drag Valisure into it as a way of trying to turn attention elsewhere. But it seems like Valisure wants to continue doing this work.
Well, there's incredible detail. I know we didn't get to all of it, but Anna, it's definitely something everybody should be reading it. You can find it on the Bloomberg terminal and at Bloomberg.com. And of course, check out as well the podcast and the Bloomberg radio show, The Big Take, at 11 p.m. Wall Street time. Anna Edney, great reporting. All right, let's get back to world and national news and Nancy Lyons in D.C. Hey, Nance.
Thanks, Carol. Evacuations are underway along the east coast of Florida, where Tropical Storm Nicole is expected to hit late tonight or early tomorrow. Governor Ron DeSantis on the storm's expected track.
The most recent track shows that it will make landfall in Martin County as a Category 1 hurricane and will move through the state, exit into the Gulf of Mexico, and then make landfall again somewhere in the Big Bend region in North Florida.
DeSantis says the storm surge could be between 3 and 5 feet. The Republican wave in midterm elections was supposed to undo the Biden presidency, but it didn't arrive. It appears the GOP is likely to win the House of Representatives, but the majority could be smaller than expected, and Democrats could still retain the Senate. Democratic strategist Jim Messina of the Messina Group tells Bloomberg the pollsters got it wrong, and there's a reason for that.
The president's party, for the first time since World War II, won independent voters. Usually independent voters go against whoever the president is because they like split government. Democrats won independent voters by 2 points last night. When you ask them, more importantly, why, the number one issue was abortion. They were furious about the abortion decision.
Jim Messina says that brought out a larger than expected turnout of young women. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Nancy Lyons.
Thank you so much, Nancy Lyons in our DC newsroom. All right, so this is something we've been talking about for a few weeks, because remember, over the past year, we know, but I think it came to light over the last month or so. We know the SEC sent letters to dozens of investment firms in recent weeks as part of an investigation. We're talking about JP Morgan, Bank of America, Citi, Goldman Sachs. It's all about, and they've been paying fines, I think a record combined $2 billion in SEC and Commodity Futures Trading Commission penalties to settle some related allegations. But we're talking about folks on Wall Street, right? Mm-hmm. Using various social media apps to communicate.
Yeah, it's not just, to your point, it's not just the big banks. Now we know that the biggest private equity firms, their use of WhatsApp and other messaging apps for work, financial regulators are looking at that too. We're talking about Apollo, we're talking about Carlyle and KKR. They all said in regulatory filings this week that they received letters from the SEC on their use of electronic messaging for business. I've never used WhatsApp.
I've used WhatsApp, especially when you're international.
It's encrypted, right?
I don't know. All I know is they're like, let's use this. Well, what's interesting is, right, you come off of, first of all, the financial crisis, right, where the rules came down really strong about how things are done, really, and in terms of how Wall Street communicates. And then you have the pandemic, everybody's at home, and people are using different messaging apps, right, to do things. WhatsApp, Signal, I've used Signal, Telegram, and some other chat apps. So people were using it, and then, you've got apps where things just disappear, so there's no record. Yeah. And Wall Street is all about keeping a record of conversations. Yeah. So we've seen it with the big banks, and now it looks like it's going into private equity as well.
Yeah, and of course, receiving a request for information doesn't imply wrongdoing. Carlyle said in the filing that it received a request for information from the SEC, quote, related to the preservation of certain types of electronic business communications. To your point, Carol, that it's all about record keeping here.
Yeah, especially when it has anything to do with a trade or investment advice, right? You need to have a record so that, if something comes up later on, you can be like, let's go to the let's go to
Don't
text.
trade over Snapchat. That disappears.
Yeah, exactly. All right, Katie Greifeld, Carol Massar, this is Bloomberg.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. Stocks are just about at the lows of the day. The S&P right now down 64 points, down 1.6%. Stocks are declining as disappointing earnings and renewed selling in cryptocurrencies is weighing on risk sentiment. Bitcoin, case in point, down 9.7%, below 17,000. Now Bitcoin at 16,896. The Dow down 524 points, down 1.6%. NASDAQ down 220 527, a decline there of 2.2%. 10-year 4.15% with the 2-year yielding 4.63%. Spot gold down 0.5%, 17.03 the ounce, and West Texas Intermediate crude down 3.6%, 85.72 a barrel. After earnings, the Walt Disney Company down 12.6%, and News Corp lower now by 4.7%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Got it, Charlie. Thank you so much. So we're tackling a lot of the most read stories on the Bloomberg today. And the next one, well, first of all, we've talked about elections, but other things that are also among the most read is the crypto carnage and subsequent questions about the crypto world. With that in mind, one of the stories on the Bloomberg today, U.S. regulators investigating whether beleaguered crypto exchange FTX.com mishandled customer funds. They're looking into the firm's relationships with other parts of Sam Bankman-Fried's crypto empire. So let's get into that side of the story. Bloomberg News SEC reporter Lydia Bayud. She joins us from our Bloomberg 99.1 studio in Washington, D.C. All right. First of all, Lydia, good to have you here. Katie, I'm going to throw it to you. This is your world. So it's been a wild couple of days here. What's the latest? Why are crypto markets kind of freaking out again?
I think crypto markets are freaking out because there's so much uncertainty right now. We're talking about two of the biggest players in the crypto space on the exchange level, and we know that the Binance letter of intent for FTX was non-binding. So there's a lot of TBDs
So they don't have
there.
to do the deal.
Yeah, we'll see. But the other big element here, and this gets to Lydia's fantastic scoop, is that FTX, Sam Bankman-Fried, he was kind of seen as like, I don't know, I've seen some people compare FTX to the JP Morgan of the crypto industry, not in that it was a bank, but just it was so important. So Lydia, tell us what regulators are exactly looking at right here, because it feels sort of twofold. You have the customer funds question. We know that FTX had liquidity issues. And then there's the relationships between FTX and all the other parts of the business.
So based on our reporting, it sounds like regulators in Washington are trying to get a better grasp on the full sweep of what's happening. We've reported that the SEC had an investigation open into FTX, the U.S. unit, well before the recent events. And that was looking at issues around the use of customer funds, customer custody, as well as the exchange's lending activities. Obviously, a lot's happened in the past 72 hours, and their probe has expanded. The CFTC also has a similar probe, and they are trying to understand, not just what's happening, but also, is there any sort of overlap between FTX.com, the international exchange, with the FTX U.S. unit? Is there any sort of arrangement as well with Alameda Research, Sam Bankman-Fried's trading firm? And they are trying to get a clearer picture about how customer funds have been used, whether there's any sort of financial arrangements in between these different entities, and kind of what ultimately are the management and board structures of these different exchanges.
And I think that that's the point in terms of customer funds that I've heard a lot of concern about. I mean, when you're talking about an exchange of any sort, any asset, when you have a liquidity issue, what does that mean? It feels like the customer funds are either there or they're not. I mean, do we know what exactly the regulators are looking into? Is it whether, the funds were sort of segregated and kept safe from those other parts of the business that you described?
That is one of the things that they're looking into, and you can look to public statements from regulators at both agencies talking about protecting customer funds as sort of sacrosanct, and that they need to be protected. And some regulators like SEC Chair Gary Gensler have raised concerns that exchanges either weren't doing a good enough job of that, or also that they're operating so many different sort of business verticals within them that there were a lot of competition and conflict of interest concerns. So I think that they are probing all of those things.
Lydia, is this a case of just the industry kind of moving so fast, although many would argue, right, crypto's been around for now a decade or so, right, in terms of when it started to creep into our world. But is it a case of just regulators not being able to keep up because things are moving so rapidly in terms of boom and bust, and just money going into it and developments happening? Or is this a case of regulators, come on, you should have had more security systems or safeguards in place by this point?
Well, Carol, I think your point goes to one of the big things that's happening in Washington. It's this debate over who regulates crypto. Is it the SEC? Is it the CFTC? Is it both? How? What does that mean in terms of their powers? And often the regulators at both agencies have been saying, well, Congress needs to decide. We've had multiple blowups of many major crypto exchanges, and Congress hasn't really moved forward. There's been a slate of several bills introduced this year and in some of the prior years, but things haven't progressed beyond that. I think the big question in Washington now is what happens next, and is something that's happening at FTX that's been kind of a marquee firm, billboards over DC metro entrances, been very friendly to members of Congress as well as the agencies trying to get some form of regulation in place. When a firm like that seems to be having so much trouble, does it move the discussion forward in Washington?
Katie, can I ask you, is it part of the problem we still don't know what it is?
What crypto is?
Yeah, I mean, when it first came on, it's like, is it a commodity? Is it a collectible? Is it a currency? Like, have we figured that out yet?
No. But I think it's not just the coins itself. It's like this decentralized finance system where you have these murky relationships, different parties lending to each other, and that's where things get really hairy. And it feels like the cryptocurrency world is so interconnected, and Lydia makes that point in her story. I mean, you think about Sam Bankman-Fried's empire. He has the exchange, but he also has his trading shop, which is Alameda Research, and the ties there are murky. But Lydia, to your earlier point that, it's unclear who regulates, whether it's the SEC or the CFTC, you write in the story that there's inquiries from both here. And I'm wondering which can bring enforcement action. Is it both? Is that a possibility here?
Well, I'll note that it's fairly common for both agencies to take enforcement action against or just to investigate companies, the same company. Yes, they both do have enforcement authorities. The SEC chair has been pretty aggressive in saying that, he thinks most digital assets are securities, that they should be registered with the SEC, that crypto exchanges should be registered with the SEC. At the same time, the CFTC has also been pretty active in the crypto space, bringing enforcement action. Their jurisdiction, however, is a little bit limited. They can't directly require firms to come in and register, but when there's fraud or abuse that's taking place, in kind of the underlying cash market, so in this case in the digital asset market, they can take action.
Well, again, a continuing story, but again, it feels like, another crisis, if you will, right?
I know. It has not been that long since we had the Terra algorithmic stablecoin blow up, since we got the Three Arrows Capital blow up. And here we are again.
Yeah, exactly. Lydia, thank you so much. Lydia Bayou, she's SEC reporter at Bloomberg News. Check her out at Bloomberg BNA on Twitter, joining us from our 991 studio in Washington, D.C. Bitcoin, don't cheat. What do you think it is, Katie?
Oh my gosh, 17,900.
It's below 17.
No.
16,742. Wow. It's down another 10, 11%.
Jeez.
Crazy, huh?
Seems bad.
Yeah. All right, we're going to continue to talk about it. We're going to check in with our TV colleagues, talk about the market trade, including the crypto trade. That's coming up next. This is Bloomberg.
countdown to the close. Bloomberg's comprehensive cross-platform coverage ahead of the U.S. market close starts right now.
And right now, we are 60 minutes away from the end of the trading day. Romaine Bostic here alongside Taylor Riggs. We're joined right now by our colleagues Carol Massar, Katie Greifeld stepping in for Tim Senovic. We welcome our audiences across Bloomberg Radio, television, as well as on YouTube and Quick Take. And Carol, I think risk sentiment has shifted quite dramatically from what we saw just a couple of days ago.
Yeah.
Be interesting to see whether this is something that is sustained or maybe just a knee-jerk reaction to the developments over the last 24 hours.
Well, we had a run-up, right? Pre-midterms, right? And this expectation of gridlock, I think we're still trying to figure out what this means. It didn't really play out as everybody expected. So it made me look at some of the sectors where there was some outperformance trading on really fundamental news. And that's the solar space, continuing to outperform, up another 0.7% here. If I look at the Invesco Solar ETF generally, it was up as almost 4% earlier in the day. Array Technologies came out, raised its full-year revenue guidance, so we saw that stock up about 12% in today's session. And then you had another reason, SunPower, up to, as analysts raised their price targets on the company, so that one was up another 2.5%. So, Katie, we continue to see investors move into the solar space.
And that is definitely a bright spot, and otherwise a really ugly
Sunny spot?
day.
Sunny spot,
That's
perhaps?
That's cute, Carol. I wasn't going to say it, but you did.
Sorry.
Let's talk about what is not moving higher. That is crypto. That is the only line that I've been watching today. Let's go straight to Bitcoin. It's down over 10%. Actually, Carol asked me to guess what I thought it was trading at. I guessed in the 17,000 somewhere. We're below that. We're at the lowest levels since November 2020.
All right, and you're also seeing the broader market on the back foot here. I think a confluence of events maybe pushing investors 757 on the S&P down almost. He's down more than 2%.
To 0.7%. Down at the bottom, things are even worse. It's tech, it's those are off 2.5%. Energy remain 7% on the day.
Weightings in the S&P day that Tesla share a great day at all. Spots out there today, believe it or not, is Meta Platforms up about 7%, though this is primarily on the back of the announcement that we get on some of those cost cuts, pretty brutal cost cuts and headcount cuts coming for that company, but placating investors, at least for the short term. Coinbase and the rest of the crypto sphere down. Coinbase down 8%. We should point out that MicroStrategy at one point was down about 20%, and Roblox falling 20% here on the day on the back of their earnings. A significant weakness coming in well short of what some analysts were looking for with regards to their bookings.
I want to push this story forward, Carol, and for me, it is all about CPI tomorrow. For the last 12 months, you've had CPI headline number year over year with a 7 handle in front of it, sometimes an 8. Every month this year alone since March, we've been having an 8 handle as well. Analysts are looking at that to decelerate a little bit, only 7.9%. So we'll see if we get finally back below an 8 handle. But it is all about these huge inflationary numbers that continue to roll in.
Am I supposed to be encouraged if it comes in at 7.9?
Nothing about that is encouraging.
Come on, Romaine. You know it's about the trend line. So if we start to
see a pretty weak trend line. So from 8.1 to 7.9.
Better than going up, I'm just going to say. All right. So listen, we got through midterms. We got through the bulk of earnings. Yeah. So once again, it's inflation.
Have you tightened your belt yet, Carol? Because I hear a lot of people tightening their belts.
I'm not wearing a belt tonight. Okay. So anyway, it's back about inflation. It's about Fed policy. You know, I'm from a large family. I don't even hear anything right now. The Federal Reserve Bank president in New York, John Williams, speaking at a conference in Zurich. And he, again, in case you forgot, everybody, what's most important when it comes to the Fed? Check it out.
Inflation is clearly far above our long-run goal, communicating that that is our goal and that that is, our North Star that we are heading to, and how we plan to, do that and how we see the economy evolving is extremely important.
All right, John Williams, president of the New York Fed there, speaking in Zurich. He reminded that it's important that the Fed get back to 2% when we're talking about, inflation. He is important. He's vice chair of the Fed. He's also a permanent member of the FOMC. So what he says matters. But come on, guys. Like, we're going through a lot of stuff. What matters is the Fed saying we've got to get inflation back down. And we're a long way from that, if you will.
And if you think about what's moving the markets today, now that we're out of midterms, I mean, I know that we still have some races to watch here, but it feels like that was just a blip. Now we're really focusing on what matters. It's CPI tomorrow, to Romaine's point. Even if we get below 8%, that's not a victory. And John Williams saying 2%. There is a lot of daylight between those two numbers.
I also thought it was interesting, too. He talked about this idea of sort of inflation uncertainty, that it was out there, though he was sort of careful to not sort of go down that road of the idea of inflation expectations becoming anchored. We know something that Powell has raised some concerns about here, unanchored, I should say, that Powell has raised some concerns about. But I think the fact that he's even sort of wading into that water, I have found not necessarily alarming, but definitely intriguing. How about that for a word?
Katie, I'm curious what you see about some of the contagion in the market. We had a CFTC commissioner join us, and want to be careful not to liken this too much to systemic risk. When you think about crypto and sort of the crypto space and some of the broad-based sell-offs that we're seeing, how much contagion or not do you still feel is out there with some of the selling pressure underway?
It's a great question. I think you have to talk about crypto, and then you have to talk about traditional finance. In crypto, I think at this point, it'd be difficult to overstate how much contagion it is, especially when you look at a coin like Solana, for example, down just a magnitude, over 20%. That ties directly to Sam Bankman-Fried backing, the Alameda research connections to it. But in terms of the traditional asset space, if you think about equities, bonds, I think it'd be a pretty shaky bridge to build a connection there. You know, this isn't what we saw in May. A lot of people have been flushed out of the crypto industry that were in both, who haven't come back.
But does this scare away maybe some of those bigger banks that we have been talking about that have, at least if not completely set up new desks for it, at least we're certainly considering dabbling in it?
I think that's the fear, that really, if you think about the institutional embrace of crypto, that had been a big rallying cry for the crypto bulls about this time last year. That's gone away.
Isn't it, though? This is what's interesting about it, right? We talked about the connection of asset classes. We talked about this early on, and we're not necessarily seeing that, right? We're not seeing the markets fall apart because of a crypto, you know, bad karma, if you will, once again.
Well, I mean, sure. I mean, the ratio of the value of that market versus, you know, the equity market and the bond market, you know, obviously works more into the favor of traditional finance. But isn't there a sentiment issue there, Carol?
A sentiment? I don't. I think there's a separation. I mean, the markets are a little bit lower, but again, even the Nasdaq down 2%. It's not like we're seeing it drop. What?
Okay.
Bitcoin's
Can
down 10%.
you come over here and show me how to move from the hot wallet to the cold wallet? Because I'm getting a little concerned here.
Let's meet at 5:05.
I have no idea what the other one.
I'm sorry, my calendar's booked. My calendar's booked. All right, guys, we got to run.
I was talking to Katie. You're there for the wine. Katie's there for crypto.
Sorry, I am here for the wine.
I think we have to go.
No whining today. We got to run. We will be back though in less than an hour's time. Radio,
Good
TV,
job,
YouTube, and Bloomberg Quick Take. We're going to count you down to the bell on this Wednesday.
It is Wednesday.
Yeah, man. Forgot what day. It feels like Friday, though.
You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Messer and Bloomberg Quick Takes Tim Stenovic on Bloomberg Radio.
It's crazy, right? In terms of the asset, like you do cross assets.
Yeah.
And I think early on we thought, was crypto an indicator for tech, or I don't know, right? We keep talking about what happened in the tech sell-off in 99 and 2000, but it does feel very different to me.
The lines are still moving in the same direction, but I think that's just idiosyncratic bad mood.
But it's not pulling down the overall market, is it?
I think you look at everything, all the macro headwinds hitting the likes of tech stocks right now. I really think that even if crypto didn't exist, I mean, God forbid, even if crypto didn't exist, it would still be down. I mean, we're getting lousy earnings. We have CPI tomorrow. The Fed people are talking about a 6% terminal rate in some corners of the market. That would still be here even if we weren't talking about crypto.
And even though we had some fun with Abigail, and you know, and I was like, is this tight monetary policy based on a historical basis? I mean, it is a tightening cycle. So everybody's kind of, you know, speaking of tightening the belt, you know, like pulling in and retrenching a little bit.
I'm not wearing a belt either. I haven't worn a belt.
It's hard to wear a belt on these things.
Like, come on, we're sitting.
Who wears belts, right?
Not me.
Everything has to have a little bit of stretchy and elastic. I do want to point out that stocks are just coming off their lows of this session. Doesn't mean that we're in the green, folks, but we're still down about 1.5% in the S&P and almost 2% lower on the Nasdaq, but off our lows of the session. All right, back to world and national news. A lot going on, as you know. Nancy Lyons in D.C. She's on it. Hey, Nance.
Thanks, Carol. Well, it is still unclear who controls Congress, with extremely tight races still to be decided. Republicans appear poised to have a slim majority in the House, and the Senate outcome likely won't be known for at least a month. The contest between incumbent Democrat Raphael Warnock and Republican Herschel Walker in Georgia is going to a runoff, and that will be held December 6th. Greg Valliere with AGF Investment says his takeaway from this midterm election is that people are ready to return to moderation.
Candidates who keep talking incessantly about the 2020 election being stolen or rigged, I didn't do well. I think the voters are sick of that. They want to move on.
Again, Greg Valliere at AGF. Russia may be trying to dial back its rhetoric over the possible use of nuclear weapons in Ukraine. We learn more from Bloomberg's Nathan Hager.
The Kremlin is circulating a note among diplomats at the International Atomic Energy Agency in Vienna. It says Russia's strategy allows for hypothetical use of nuclear weapons, but only if another country uses them first or if the very existence of the Russian state is in jeopardy. This is the second time Russia's tried to clarify its nuclear doctrine after President Vladimir Putin warned this year he would use all available means to defend parts of Ukraine he has illegally annexed. In Washington, I'm Nathan Hager, Bloomberg Radio.
American basketball star Brittany Griner is being moved to a Russian penal colony. That's according to her legal team. Griner's appeal against a 9-year sentence for drug smuggling was rejected last month. The White House says it continues to follow up with Russia on ways to secure Griner's release. Global news 24 hours a day, on air, and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Nancy Lyons.
All right, Nance, thank you so much. Nancy Lyons in D.C., Carol Masser and Katie Greifeld here at Bloomberg headquarters in New York City, on YouTube, on Quick Take, and in our Interactive Broker studio. TikTok slashing about $2 billion off its target for 2022 ad revenue. If we needed a theme for this year, this is one of it, the ad market.
Oh, big time. And the social media giants, because you think about what we heard from Meta, what we heard from Google. Right. I mean, everyone is really feeling the pain of reduced advertising dollars. A big slash from TikTok. I was a little bit surprised to see this because I spend so much time on TikTok.
Yeah.
But you had the CEO tell a handful of employees during a recent meeting that the Chinese-owned app, it slashed its ad forecasts to $10 billion from at least $12 billion previously. That is according to a person briefed on the matter. That revision did not include smaller business segments such as e-commerce. The person added, asking not to be identified.
All right, so as Katie mentioned, this is a theme that we are talking about a lot here at Bloomberg. Marketing spending, you know, when you're running a company, marketing often gets pulled in pretty quickly if you've got to cut corners and cut costs. So we are seeing marketing spending worldwide, a pullback, companies and consumers tightening budgets and preparing to ride out a potential recession. So as Katie mentioned, we've seen it from the likes of Alphabet, Amazon, Meta, Microsoft have all reported results that largely fell short of projections, shaving hundreds of millions to billions of dollars from their market valuations. But you know, when there's pressure on your publicly held company, you're going to be put under the microscope. So if you can cut some costs, whether it's marketing, workers, whatever, you're doing it.
Oh, big time. And just to recap, TikTok, of course, is owned by ByteDance, the world's most valuable startup. That was largely due to the success of TikTok and its Chinese counterpart. But even still, it's been squeezed by Beijing's crackdown on internet firms at home, Washington's suspicion, and of course, these macro headwinds that are now eating into the advertising.
It's kind of been in the crosshairs of so much, right?
I know.
Are you really on it every day?
Oh, it's so fun.
Is it those damn cat things?
Do not download it. It just rots your brain.
Is it you and the cats?
It's really, I do get a lot of cat videos on my For You page.
All right, this is Bloomberg.
Connection lost.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. We've got 43 minutes to go ahead of the closing bell. Stocks are holding close to session lows the day after the election. Dow, S&P, and NASDAQ all in the red. Let's head right over to the first word breaking news desk for today's afternoon call. Here he is, Bailey Lipschultz.
And good afternoon, Charlie. Stocks have remained under pressure throughout the day after poor earnings and as crypto uncertainty hits risky assets. The Dow is down 520 points. S&P is lower by 65, with the NASDAQ falling 230 points. The U.S. 10-year yield is at 4.15%, and small caps are down 2%. All 11 main S&P sectors are trading lower, led by losses in energy and consumer discretionary, and Bitcoin is down 10% to the lowest in nearly 2 years. NASDAQ Biotechs fall 25 points, transports are lower by 300, semis dropped by 70 points, while the VIX is higher by 2%. Leaders in the Dow, Merck, McDonald's, and Procter & Gamble, while Disney, Dow Inc., and Chevron are the worst performers. Disney fell the most since March 2020 after bad earnings. Roblox crashed 20% after missing estimates, and Amazon is on pace to become the first public company to lose $1 trillion in market value. In other news, Robinhood and Coinbase led a $10 billion stock rout for crypto-exposed companies. Wrapping things up, look for earnings from Wynn Resorts, Rivian, and Redfin after the bell. Live from the First Word Breaking News Desk, I'm Bailey Lipschultz. Charlie?
Okay, we thank you very much, Bailey. This update brought to you by SEI. Imagine your asset management firm's operational infrastructure as a competitive advantage. Let SEI show you how at SEIC.com/IMS. And to hear live breaking news over your Bloomberg, types on your Bloomberg terminal. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. Bloomberg Business Week on this Wednesday. Carol Massar, along with Katie Greifeld. Tim Stanovic is off this week. And we wanted to get into Meta a little bit today because kudos for accountability. But I got to say, it's never great to hear Katie from the CEO of a company say, I got this wrong.
I made a mistake. Yeah, no, it's a good habit to be in. But if you're a shareholder, I don't know, maybe you're not thrilled.
No, but Meta shares are actually up today.
I know.
All right, so let's get behind some of this because Mark Zuckerberg, the CEO of Meta Platforms, did say, I got this wrong. He sent this out in a statement to his employees. Along with it, there's going to be a lot of job cuts. So with a deep understanding of Meta, let's bring in Bloomberg Intelligence Senior Technology Analyst Mandeep Singh. He is here in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker studio. So Meta shares are up. Isn't it grand? Cost cuts, thousands will lose jobs, other kind of different cost cuts, and investors say, yay, stock's up about 6%. All right, walk us through and make sense of this statement from Mark Zuckerberg.
Well, they just had an earnings call 2 weeks back, and they told us, expenses will grow almost 15 to 18%. So clearly, this is welcome news that they are able to just, tone down the expense growth. They know the revenue growth is going to be slow next year because of ad pricing and all the headwinds we are seeing on the ad side. But look, in my mind, he's not telling us that Reality Labs will be, less of a drain next year.
That's the metaverse, right?
That's the metaverse, and in fact, he's saying that Reality Labs will lose more money next year based on our projections. It could be close to $15 billion. So when you think about the cost cuts, it could save about maybe $3 billion, given the size of the cost cuts. And so they're still losing over $10 billion because they are betting so big on the metaverse. And look, maybe in the long term, it's the right thing to do. You need that runway for growth for a company like Meta. But at the same time, there are things they could do in the core business. TikTok is taking share from them. So why are they not focused on that aspect? Because TikTok, based on our calculations, is growing, 30, 40%, even in this kind of environment. And obviously, Meta is not growing, so that's the part that should be emphasized more as opposed to the metaverse part where they're losing almost, $15 billion a year.
I will say I'm a TikTok person. My husband uses Reels. It's a whole thing. But given what you just said, the fact that we're looking at billions and billions of dollars of losses, the fact that we are getting these job cuts, you make the point in a recent Bloomberg Intelligence piece that these meta job cuts, they help, but offsetting that $15 billion loss is really tough to do. When you look at what's happening in shares, a 6.5% rally on Monday, fell a little bit yesterday, and now, again, today, we're up another 6%. Is this an overreaction?
No, because the stock is down almost 75%. So a 6% bump doesn't do anything, doesn't excite, the long-term shareholders. They're more looking for sustainable top-line growth. And look, this company we know generated 40% free cash flow margins in the past before it, ventured into the metaverse bet. And look, there's nothing wrong in investing for the long term. Alphabet is losing about $10 billion a year. It's a combination of $3 billion in cloud and $6 billion in other bets, which includes its Waymo. It's just Meta needs to tone down the size of its bet, especially for something that doesn't have proven commercial success, at least so far, and it's still a very niche market.
So this was a company in 2021 that had a market cap of over $1 trillion. We're now at $270 billion. Like you said, it's down 70% this year alone. I mean, talk about a haircut. Is this a company that has a business model that could, though, at some point get back to that $1 trillion? And if they do what you just said, they maybe should do?
Well, so look, the core business is still a 40-50% free cash flow margin business. And look, this company has over $100 billion in revenue. Yes, it's not growing, but they're still maintaining that impressions growth and they're pivoting to Reels. So they have a growth problem that they're trying to address through the metaverse. We don't know how far out that is, but if they are successful, and for that, they need to build an ecosystem. They just can't do metaverse in isolation. They need more content. They need, like Microsoft partnership was a good one, but that's more of on the commercial side. That doesn't do anything on the consumer side where you need Apple, you need, the large consumer internet companies, and that is where there are a lot of unknowns how viable that bet is on the consumer side.
Mandeep, 30 seconds. I feel like a big problem with Reels is that when my husband shows me a Reel, I saw it on TikTok 2 weeks ago. I mean, how do you bring creators to Reels?
You need to have a revenue sharing model like a YouTube where you share almost 60% of the revenue with the creators. Right now, Meta keeps everything. They don't do, they share very minimal with the creators. So to bring the creators on the platform, to create original content on the platform, you need to have a revenue sharing model.
I hope they're listening.
Honey, you're like, yeah, I saw that 2 weeks ago.
But it's nice that he's showing me.
It is sweet. Should they go back to calling themselves Facebook? Maybe this Meta thing?
A first Boston situation?
Yeah, or come up with another name. Meta definitely isn't working.
Mandeep Singh, thank you so much. Senior Tech Industry Analyst. He's incredible. Bloomberg Intelligence here in the studio. As we said, though, Meta shares, they are rallying.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
All right, everybody. This is Bloomberg Business Week. Carol Massar along with Katie Greifeld. I love Tim Stanovic, my host, but it's always fun.
Tim who?
Here. I know. If he's watching, he's going to be like, you're going to get a text from
call
him.
in, yeah.
Katie's been really busy today. Our whole crypto team has. It's one of our big stories. We're going to do a little bit of a deeper dive into it, and also implications for kind of old line Wall Street. Right?
Oh, yeah. What do the tentacles look like when you think about how quickly the crypto industry grew?
All right, we're going to get into that in just a moment. Let's get back, though, to Charlie Pellet with just about 29 minutes to go in the trading session. Hey, Charlie.
Hi, thank you very much. Carol, let us begin with crypto because that is certainly weighing on sentiment today. 28 minutes to go ahead of the close. Bitcoin now down 10.6% below 17,000. 16,706 right now on Bitcoin. The Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all declining. Disappointing earnings also weighing on sentiment. The S&P is down 70 points, lower by 1.85%. The Dow's down 563, a drop there of 1.7%, and NASDAQ right now down 231, a drop of 2.2%. The 10-year yield 4.13%, with the 2-year yielding 4.61%. Spot gold 17.06 the ounce, while West Texas Intermediate crude is down 3.6% now, 85.75 a barrel on WTI. Shares of the Walt Disney Company are plunging 12.6% as it evaluates its costs and is seeking, quote, meaningful efficiencies after reporting results that did fall short of expectations and has wiped out about $15 billion in market value. Geetha Raghunathan is a media analyst for Bloomberg Intelligence.
So they didn't talk too much about job cutting itself. In terms of streaming profitability, what they really are looking to do is, first of all, improve the top line growth, and they're going to be able to do that with a 38%, increase in their prices as well as a new advertising tier. But they're also really looking to kind of rationalize marketing expenses, and that's where really a lot of the cost cutting is going to come.
And again, Disney shares down now by 12.5%. News Corp shares declining after the media company reported first quarter results that missed expectations. News Corp down now by 4.8%. So again, down day on Wall Street here. The Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ all in the red, close to session lows, with the S&P down now by 1.8%. We have got, again, the 10-year yielding 4.13% and the 2-year 4.60%. Don't want to forget gold today down 0.4%, and Bitcoin, worth repeating, lower now by 10%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. All right, so as we've said, one of our big stories, cryptocurrencies extending declines to the lowest levels in about 2 years as Binance is seen increasingly unlikely to follow through on its takeover of FTX.com. There's a lot going on. Remember what happened yesterday. Binance, the CEO, stunning the crypto world with an announcement that his firm was moving to take over FTX.com, which suffered a liquidity crunch. There's a lot going on here.
There is a lot going on. And I mean, the story is still moving, reporting out today that FTX's financial black hole leaves Binance balking at a potential rescue. According to sources familiar that Bloomberg talked to, that the books were so bad, maybe the deal won't happen.
This is why you've been taking phone calls, right? She's been a busy lady. Let's get to, though, because there's also what's going on in the crypto universe, as well as we're watching what's going on with traditional Wall Street. And on that is Bloomberg Wall Street reporter Sonali Basak. She joins us via Zoom in New York City. Sonali, it is important to kind of talk about the tentacles. So what do we need to know, and what have you found out?
When it comes to the Binance deal, you mean?
Yes.
So here's the thing. The thing that Katie is talking about is pretty remarkable, because Yueqi Yang, who is a brilliant reporter on market structure and crypto market structure for us, that hole between the assets and liabilities could be as big as $6 billion. To put that into perspective for you, the entire market value of Credit Suisse is just over $10 billion. So the hole could be quite large, and the question really is, where's the money? And so there are a lot of existential questions here, of course, about this deal itself, what happens in the exchange universe, will customers be made whole? But really, there's a very immediate question here about where this money is and what it means for the longevity of this entity, let alone anything that was connected to it.
Shanali, something that I've struggled with over the past, day is trying to put this into context for people who don't live and breathe crypto news like you and I do. So,
why do I care? Normal
yeah,
Carol?
or how does this moment compare to, what we saw in May? I heard a lot about Terra, something about 3 arrows, a blow up there. What is this moment in crypto? Is this a Lehman moment? How dramatic can we get?
So it's hard to call it a Lehman moment, right? Because the Lehman Brothers was connected to the entire financial system. Whereas with crypto, there's ways to get into it, there's ways to get out of it, and there are certain ways that it connects to the financial system and certain ways that it really doesn't that much. So why does FTX matter? Because it is one of the biggest exchanges. And FTX.com has a lot of international entities. FTX US is not the entity that's being sold or potentially being sold to Binance. FTX US is, one of the members of ISDA, which is really a central body when it comes to the derivatives market. FTX was on the verge of not just being a big player in cryptocurrencies, they also started offering stocks. And you have to wonder that this was a group of people who were pioneers in creating this new financial system. There was a lot of hope and optimism and pushes towards regulatory clarity. And that is both with the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, and the CFTC, the Commodities Trading Futures Commission. So literally, this was really starting to operate at a very large scale. And like I said, billions of dollars, the size of full banks at stake here. So people will potentially lose a lot of money. But even more than that, it really puts into question the dream of what this financial future was supposed to look like.
So are we at this point, Shanali, and I guess I don't know that anybody's going to have an answer, but I do. Is it just we look at this as another setback in a new developing market and just a hard lesson being learned and regulators being behind, like all of this happening, right? We see it when we have past crises, whether it was the housing crisis or the tech meltdown, just another crisis where we've got to figure this all out. Or is this the end of crypto?
So I've covered crypto since 2015. So it's really hard for me to sit there and say it would be the end of crypto because we have seen so many episodes before. Mm-hmm. This is certainly large and hits people in a different way. But, take a look at Bitcoin because Bitcoin is down about 16% over 7 days. It's still above 15,000, but it has crashed through below that 18,000 mark that we were just at a day ago. And that was a pretty psychological mark. So, it's hard to say. I think another thing to look at here is how damaged are other players going to be. You had Mike Novogratz, billionaire Mike Novogratz. His firm, Galaxy Digital, has kind of marginal exposure to FTX.
Right.
But the crypto pains are big enough in the industry to send his stock down more than 15% today.
Yeah,
and,
it's pretty amazing.
A lot of worries ahead.
Yeah, a lot to still figure out. Shanali, thank you so much. Our Shanali Balsic. Right now, back to D.C. with a check on world and national news and Nancy Lyons. Hey, Nance.
Thanks, Carol. The GOP had hoped to capitalize on President Biden's low approval ratings and swap the Democrats in Congress. But that didn't happen. Republicans do appear likely to take the House, but with a very narrow majority. And the Senate is still up for grabs. The Georgia race between incumbent Democrat Raphael Warnock and Republican Herschel Walker is heading for a runoff in 4 weeks. Bloomberg's Anne-Marie Hordern says the lack of a red wave is viewed as a positive for the Biden administration.
This was a good night for the White House and for President Biden. This is not as big as a loss as they were expecting, and it's the best the president has done in a midterm election, usually, which is supposed to be seen as a referendum on the individual in the White House, the best it's been since George Bush after the September 11 terrorist attacks.
Bloomberg's Anne-Marie Hordern will be hearing from President Biden within the hour. Abortion access was on the ballot for nearly 56 million Americans, testing sentiment just months after the U.S. Supreme Court threw out the Roe v. Wade precedent.
Vermont, Michigan, and California had measures to secure a woman's right to abortion access. Those measures all passed with 50 55% of the vote in Michigan, more than 77% of the vote in Vermont, supporting a constitutional right to an abortion. And in California, the proposed amendment passed with more than 70% of the vote. It was a different question in Kentucky, denying a constitutional right to an abortion. That proposal failed, with more than 52% of the vote. In Washington, I'm Amy Morris, Bloomberg Radio.
Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries.
All right, Nancy Lyons, thank you so much. Nancy Lyons in D.C. So, whenever this kind of story comes out, it tends to trend high. Wall Street loves reading about Wall Street.
It makes sense. Hollywood loves movies about Hollywood.
Media loves reading about media.
Oh, here we are.
There we are. That's life in a nutshell. This story is about Goldman Sachs. Their top tier will see the biggest infusion of partners during David Solomon's run atop the finance giant. Being made a Goldman partner, right? It's like, whoa. It is.
Well, this time around,
many would say.
Oh yeah, big time. Anyone at
According to
Goldman would say, according to sources, it's a pretty big deal. If you were one of the 80 employees that was tapped in this biennial ritual to join what has long been considered one of Wall Street's most prestigious clubs, less than 1% of the firm makes up the top rank. This year's class of Goldman, those making this rank, is 33% bigger than the one from 2020. That is quite a jump. Inflation.
Yeah.
How about it?
And I bet they're going to be talking about this headline just crossing. And it is saying that the FTX deal, this is according to the Wall Street Journal, is not happening.
Oh, my goodness. There we go.
So
let's bring that up. I mean, this is what we have been tracking when Binance, the CEO, CZ, tweeted that this is a non-binding letter of intent. That was the immediate reason why people were telling me you saw Bitcoin and the likes of every other cryptocurrency just drop, because we're talking about so much uncertainty. Would this go through? And according to sources from the Wall Street Journal, Binance is citing due diligence for dropping this FTX deal. What an incredible 72 hours this has been.
I mean, this is crazy, right? We talk about these cycles, and I mean, and as you said, there was nervousness in the market that this would ultimately get done. And here you have, again, from the Wall Street Journal, just a headline, Binance walking away from the FTX deal.
And you look at Bitcoin extending losses, now down 12%. It is nearing $16,000 a coin.
All right, we'll continue to follow right here on Bloomberg.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. We begin with a developing story. Binance walking away from the FTX deal. This, according to the Wall Street Journal, citing company statements. Certainly, we have got crypto weighing on sentiment today. The Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ, all in the red. 13 minutes to go. But right now, Bitcoin is plunging 12.5%. Bitcoin now at 16,350. Again, repeating the headline on the Bloomberg, Binance walking away from the FTX deal. This, according to the Wall Street Journal, citing a company statement. The S&P now down 78 points, drop there of 2.1%, with the Dow down 641, down 1.9%. NASDAQ, the composite index, down 260, a drop there of 2.5%. The 10-year yield 4.11%, with the 2-year yielding 4.59%. Spot gold 17.05 the ounce, down 0.4%. West Texas Intermediate crude down 3.8%, 85.55 a barrel. Again, Bitcoin plunging 13.1%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
I'm driving in my car. I turn on the radio.
How about you let me drive?
Oh, no.
Comments from Brett Jensen.
Honey, please, I'll do the driving.
Drive on.
Excuse me, I want to drive. It's the question that drives us.
This is the Drive to the Close.
That funky music will drive us till the dawn.
On Bloomberg Radio.
All right, everybody. Yeah, it is time for the drive to the close. A lot going on. You heard Charlie talk about it. The Wall Street Journal citing a company statement from Binance. Binance walking away from the FTX deal. Binance citing due diligence for dropping that deal specifically and citing reports that FTX mishandled customer funds. Again, this is coming from the Wall Street Journal. And at the same time, the head of the SEC, Gary Gensler, saying some U.S. crypto bills undermine securities rules. Investors are getting hurt. That's a quote, his words, in the crypto markets. And he is concerned about opacity and leverage in the crypto market. He's speaking at a Healthy Markets Association event, so a lot of stuff happening right now. But Katie, as you know, a lot happening in the crypto market, and the cryptocurrencies all under a lot of pressure today.
Oh, big time. You look at the price of Bitcoin, now down 13.5%. We are hovering just above $16,000 a coin, levels we haven't seen in a long time. And I mean, just the implications of this Wall Street Journal report. We know that Binance was coming in to help with FTX liquidity issues. If Binance isn't there, what happens?
Yeah,
I don't know.
It's a good question. And maybe because investors, it doesn't take a lot for more nervousness to come into the overall trade, certainly on the equity side of things. And we are seeing kind of another leg down when it comes to stocks. We're looking at the NASDAQ, the Dow, and the S&P at their lows of the session. Really the underperformer, the NASDAQ down about 2.5%. All right, so let's talk more broadly about the trade. And with us is Jimmy Lee, founder and CEO at the Wealth Consulting Group. It's an independent wealth management registered investment advisory firm. They've got roughly $2.9 billion in assets under management. He's back with us on the phone from Las Vegas. Does feel like, forgive me, making the connection between Vegas and crypto, it does feel like a lot of risk, and certainly when it comes to the trade. But what do you think about, Jimmy, when it comes to all of the headlines out of the crypto world, what it says to you about this market and any connection or lack thereof among other asset classes?
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me on today. Hi. And, you know, the message from crypto, I think, is just risk off. I mean, we've seen how in the run-up of crypto, how correlated it was to, like, the NASDAQ and technology stocks and growth stocks. And so I think investors are very nervous about a trading platform like this, potentially, you know, not making it out of the situation and concerned about their funds. And so I think it's a risk-off day because
but on that last point,
crypto investors, I mean, I think a lot of traditional investors dipped their toe into crypto assets, and they opened up their Coinbase accounts and made some limited investments. And so I don't think it's going to have a huge impact on the traditional investor. I think it is going to have, there'll be from that, other areas in
Congress, and
I think it creates some more buying opportunities. So I'm definitely in a minority of people that believe that we may still, or not we, but the Fed could possibly somehow miraculously create a soft landing still. And so I think there's a chance that inflation could come down, and without the economy being destroyed by the Fed continuing to hike rates the way they have. And part of that is because I think the consumer has been very resilient because there's a lot of cash in the consumer's hands still that hasn't been spent. And businesses have been very resilient. So certainly in certain sectors, there's going to be more layoffs and some more pain economically that businesses are going to have to go suffer through while the Fed's on this path. But the key thing I would love for the listeners to think about is, it's not if, but it's just when the Fed and the chairman, Powell, says that we're going to pause.
Yeah.
So it's going to happen, and I don't think we have to wait that long for that to happen. By the time that happens, my opinion is that stocks will be up a lot by then. And so I think investors need to be positioned prior to that. So the sell-off that we're getting from the midterms, I think creates more opportunity. I mean, the bottom line is we're going to get gridlock for another couple of years, which is what we knew was going to happen anyways. And so I don't think it changes a ton of different things in terms of, what legislation would have been or wouldn't have been over the next 2 years. And I think the focus will be then on the presidential election in 2024.
Right. We don't have long to wait. But, Jimmy, to the point that the Fed will eventually pause, when it does, what do you think that is the bigger benefit to when you look at the cross-asset landscape? In the event of a Fed pause or a pivot, is it stocks or is it bonds that rally more?
Both. I would say that stocks probably have a little bit more upside, especially growth stocks. So as the interest rates pause and then eventually come back down, the valuation of the high growth names, I think, will have a chance to go back up. And so, but us, when we talk to the bond managers that we work with, they're the most excited they've been in their careers for decades, because there's actually some value and some opportunities to make money in bonds. So I think for the first time, I think there are some good opportunities on both sides of both the debt and equity side. But I think it's going to take some good, active management to make sure that you own the right types of bonds on the fixed income side that will perform the best. And there's still risk out there. Rates are not going down anytime soon, and rates are still continuing to go up. And so, there's, we're watching liquidity issues with the fixed income marketplace. We're watching other areas that we think potentially could have risk. Again, I don't think that this situation with FTX is going to create contagion in other areas.
Right.
But we're watching for what could potentially happen. And so I think right now investors should be cautious, but they should also be optimistic, because again, when Chairman Powell uses some sort of language that talks about a pause, I think by then it'll be, equity markets will be up a lot by then already.
All right, we're going to leave it there. Jimmy Lee, thank you so much. Founder and CEO at Wealth Consulting Group, $2.9 billion in assets under management, joining us on the phone from Los Angeles.
To a day where we're looking at an S&P 500 down 2% here on the day, a NASDAQ down more than that, and a crypto sphere right now that appears to be in complete disarray. Mike McGlone joining us right now to talk a little bit more about this. Mike, you look at the price action right now with fresh lows on pretty much all of the major tokens here. What gives?
Hi, Romaine. I think the key thing to think about is
This is the world's fastest moving asset leading indicator breaking down with contagion implications for all assets. You pointed out maybe this is the potential that'll help flip bonds to a bull market like I heard Jersey was saying. But it's the trickle down. It's the thing that me that's striking is the juxtaposition from when I trickle down. It's the thing that me that's striking is the juxtaposition from when I was at that SALT conference run by Sam Bankman-Fried's firm in Bahamas when he was on the stage with Bill Clinton and former Prime Minister Tony Blair.
Yes.
He was top of the world, and it turns out he might be a fraud. This is a significant shock, but it's the contagion effects. I think it's more macro that's trickling down now.
Well, and how do we look at this as, bigger, broader investors, Mike, in terms of what's happening? Gary Gensler making some comments at an event, and he's concerned about opacity, leverage in the crypto market. No surprise there. Is this just a case of regulators? They've really got to kind of get their act together in terms of oversight of this market.
Oh, yes, and who better than the U.S. to do it properly? Because remember, the key thing about cryptos is they have migrated to the dollar as the base layer. So the key support to watch now is Ethereum around 1,000.
Yeah.
Because I think Bitcoin might even head to 10 to 12,000 as a good support.
Wow.
And we know 20,000 is good resistance.
Yeah.
You got the closing bell.
Sit tight for 1 second here, Mike. Bitcoin down about 13%, Solana down 42%. Closing bells in equity markets in New York with the Dow Jones Industrial Average down 2% on the day, about 647 points. The S&P 500 down 80 points or 2%, while the NASDAQ going to close lower by about 2.5% here on the day. The Russell 2000 moving lower as well, 2.8% here. We should point out that all of these indices right now pretty much around the lows of the day as sentiment shifting dramatically from what we saw over the previous 3 days.
And I want to get back to Mike McGlone because I'm curious, Mike, about some of the ripple effects within these markets. It's Julianne Emanuel over at Evercore ISI that's saying if you get significant stress in Bitcoin, 13.85, for example, or a trade below 8.3, you do start to feel financial shocks that we think about during a Fed tightening cycle. Again, remind us how sort of idiosyncratic risk this is, or if this is more macro headwinds coming from a Federal Reserve on a quick, fast rate hike cycle.
No, it's all macro. The key thing to remember is, Taylor, this is 1929-ish. The world is tilting towards recession, and central banks, including the Fed, most notably the Fed, are increasing their restraints. So this is just part of that trickle down. Now, I think it's towards the end of the year. Remember, this is the time of year people have to make those final decisions. They've been buying dips all year. It's not working, so they're hitting stops. Crude oil was the first ones that followed Bitcoin yesterday. Crude oil still has a lot of room to drop because it's still too expensive. Stock market's already corrected a lot, and Bitcoin is that leading indicator. So it's the question of where it stops, but I think this leads us to the year end, which is this bear market's not going to go out as a lamb.
I do just want to point out, too,
great reversion.
I do just want to point out, too, here, as with the closing bells here on equities, all of those crypto stocks meaningful lower on the day. Riot Blockchain down about 8%. MicroStrategy down 19% on the day, and Coinbase down about 10%.
And Mike, I want to focus in on the crypto sphere itself. When you think about contagion to the other asset classes, maybe it's a tough bridge to build. But when you think about what is going on with the coin themselves, everything, if you look at crypto on the terminal, is red, obviously. But Solana catches my eye. That token is down 43%, Mike. Of course, SBF had been a big supporter of that blockchain, of that token. How bad could things get?
It can get very bad. I'm looking at the key support you need to look for in Bitcoin is around $10,000 to $12,000. And that's been my biggest problem all along. There's over 20,000 of these speculative trading crypto assets, and maybe 100 of them are legitimate. And to me, that's what we're taking out. We're flushing out those excesses. But the key thing to think about here, in the past, we had markets really drop. Cryptos are leading. The Fed would come in and ease. This is not happening. So, and crypto's taking it out. Yes, they got plenty to go lower. And it's going to be a long time, I think, before we reach a plateau that really settles things down.
All right. Yeah. Looking right now, you have Bitcoin, at least based on Bloomberg pricing, now testing that 16,000 level. A break below that certainly could have some ramifications here. And this, of course, on a day where we saw a lot of the big cap tech names in the equity space also move lower, with Apple down 3%, Tesla down about 7%, Disney falling about 13%. Mike, when it comes to the crypto sphere here, we've spoken with several people here, including the CEO of Lolly. We spoke with the CFTC commissioner a little bit earlier as well as a few other folks, and they all seem to be pointing to this idea that maybe what's ailing FTX and Binance doesn't necessarily need to be sort of that nail in the coffin for the crypto space writ large. The idea that there's still some sort of stability in Bitcoin itself, the idea that there is still some sort of underlying technology here that people will remain invested in.
Well, I completely agree with that, Romain. There's one thing to remember about Ethereum. It's making possible the most widely traded cryptos on the planet are crypto dollars. The base layer is the dollar. That the U.S. is not going to mess that up. But this thing with Sam Bankman, I met him in the Bahamas, and I'm just shocked that he turned out to be just a giant fraud. And the FTX exchange, that's what it's going through.
Right.
We'll get through that. But this is the bottom line. The technology is legit. There's so much talent in there. It's just, remember we saw what happened in internet stocks from 2000 2002. We're seeing in cryptos now, and it's going to get worse.
All right, Mike McClellan there of Bloomberg Intelligence for us. And we should point out, of course, we have not yet heard from Sam Bankman-Fried himself yet on the latest developments. And, of course, still an investigation going on as to exactly what happened there, whether it was fraud or maybe something else. Guys, come back into this conversation here. I'm not even sure where to start here on a day where we have a midterm election. We've got a big CPI report tomorrow. And then, of course, all this crypto volatility in between.
I guess what we have to say is, like, this is certainly, even though cryptocurrencies and the crypto world has been around for, 10 years or so and counting, it's still a new world. Anytime you talk to somebody who is very involved and entrenched in this, says we're very early innings on the crypto space. We talked with the Coinbase CEO came on Bloomberg Television and said, we're not investing customer friends. We're not doing market making or engaging in any kind of complex arrangement with other parties that we own, basically saying we don't have the problems. I guess at this point, we're kind of seeing some of, I don't know whether you call it some of the more risky plays. I guess we have to be careful because we have to find out more information about what exactly this company was doing to understand where were the weak points in this. And this is where regulators, I think many would argue, have been, behind in this process.
And your point to regulators, we've been talking about this idea of this sort of the lack of transparency here, which is making it hard to know what's going on. And just to go back, and just to be clear that we clarify here with regards to Sam Bankman-Fried himself, as well as his properties, whether it's FTX or Alameda, we do not know if this is fraud. There are obviously a lot of allegations out there, but we do have to wait for this investigation. And of course, we invite Sam Bankman-Fried himself and anyone else from his organization to speak to us. But we should point out a lot we don't know, and there's going to be probably some time before we get a definitive answer as to what exactly happened.
It's a rapidly evolving story. Investigations are underway. It's important to remember that. There are more questions than answers. Let's bring in Hannah Miller. She is Bloomberg News crypto reporter. We're going to ask her some of the hard questions. Hannah, what I want to know is what could possibly happen to FTX here, because we heard from Sam Bankman-Fried on Twitter yesterday that the reason that they were looking at this deal with Binance was to relieve some of those liquidity issues. If Binance isn't going to come in here, what theoretically happens to all of these massive withdrawals?
Yes, so there is a lot at play here, but bankruptcy for FTX is a possibility. There's also the potential for legal action. We know in Binance's statement and them walking away from the deal that they brought up concerns that there was illegal things happening here. So it's really hard to say. Brian Armstrong said yesterday that customers could lose funds if this deal does not go through. That seems like a likelihood.
Hannah, this is where we have to figure out contagion. We all do as a news organization, or can we just kind of, section it off in terms of FTX specifically? How are you guys going about it? How are you thinking about it?
Yeah, so Sam Bankman-Fried and FTX have a far reach within the crypto industry, so this is a complex situation. We are looking at multiple angles, including the various deals and bailouts that Sam Bankman-Fried had in play. We are looking at the companies that have connections to them. We are looking at Alameda Research, which is the crypto trading firm that Bankman-Fried also co-founded. So there's really a lot to examine here, and it's going to be a complex story that is going to unfold in incredible ways, I think.
Hannah, when you're thinking about some of the ripple effects, the contagion, it's interesting. James Seifert over at Bloomberg Intelligence wrote in and said, we're not seeing it yet on the terminal. It'll update soon. But the Grayscale Bitcoin Trust just closed at a 40% discount to the NAV. And I'm sort of curious how you think about liquidity in this market and sort of the ripple effects as well.
Yeah, there's definitely, I think, a risk for contagion here. You know, we do see players disclosing exposure. You know, Genesis was another one. And it's really hard to say, you know, what's going to happen here. Regarding liquidity, you know, it's been interesting having conversations with people about, you know, what FTT means for liquidity. You know, that's the native token to FTX, and part of what drove the situation. So it's definitely a complex scenario.
All right, in conversation right now with Hannah Miller over at Bloomberg News as we keep an eye on what's going on in the crypto space. Bitcoin still on the back foot, down about 14%. Solana now down almost 46% here. We should point out that we are still keeping our eye here on the outcomes of the U.S. midterm elections, and we are expected to hear comments from the President of the United States, Joe Biden, there at the White House. Not quite clear exactly what he's going to say, but we do know that he is going to address the outcome of those elections. We will bring you his comments as soon as we're sure that he's getting to them. And when we look here, and Katie, I actually am curious about your thoughts here, going back here to the crypto space and Bitcoin, about the potential contagion risk that I think a lot of people are looking at. Look, we know the crypto space is a much smaller market, a few $1 billion in market value overall versus an equity market that alone is something like, what, $25 trillion here. So contagion is, I guess, a much different thing in that space versus maybe what we saw when we saw the housing market collapse or the Lehman Brothers collapse.
Exactly. I mean, in some ways, perhaps it's a blessing that we have had this tremendous drawdown. You think about the crypto market being worth $3 trillion a few months ago, and now, what, under $1 trillion or close to it? So a lot of that money has been already flushed out, people who would have been hurt right now. But again, you go back to the issue of FTX having a liquidity crunch, facing these massive withdrawals. If you think about who is involved with that platform, it's a lot of retail, and there's a lot of pain potentially to come.
We are also getting a lot of earnings, you guys. I know as we're digesting a lot of this crypto news. Bumble, of course, is one that we're following here. And I'm just going to pull it up. They're looking at, as you can see here, fourth quarter revenue that also is coming in light, $232 million to $237 million. Expectations had been for almost $254 million as well. So you're seeing, again, forward guidance that comes in really, really light. Romaine, particularly the third quarter numbers that we also got that looked light as well. 233 estimates had been for 237.9 for the third quarter top line numbers too.
We came into this morning with actually an interesting headline out of Redfin that they were cutting 13% of their staff and shutting down that home flipping business. The company now coming out with earnings here after the bell with a third quarter loss of about 83 cents a share. That's bigger than what the street was looking for, and revenue of about $600 million, which is roughly in line with what the street was looking for. The share is down here in after hours trading, and it might have something to do with the guidance. 4Q net loss 118 to 134. That's the guidance that they're giving. That would be much bigger loss than what the street was looking for on average, Carol, of $65 million.
Well, we've heard it from Open Door, we've heard it from Zillow, we've heard it from Compass, right? When it comes to the housing market, we have seen an incredible retrenchment, and it is affecting and really impacting, you know, all of these folks within this sector. And keep in mind, right, as you said, Romaine, we came into this report from Redfin with already news about them doing some layoffs. So again, and shutting this business, no surprise, but again, getting pretty rough, guys.
And again, just looking at some of the post-market action in those names, Redfin shares down 3%. You look at Bumble, just an absolute wipeout, down almost 19%. There is no margin for error in this environment.
Yeah, you're seeing Unity Software down, AppLovin down on the back of earnings. Rivian earnings actually coming out as well. Their 3Q revenue, Taylor, coming in at $536 million. That's below the street estimate of $561 on a consensus basis. The adjusted loss per share, $157, which is better than consensus.
Still trying to look at full year production of 25,000 vehicles, but the estimate was over 26,000, and they're really highlighting number R1 backlog of over 114,000. Carol, as you really think about this company and the path forward to profitability.
All right, so Rivian's higher, so too is Beyond Meat, up about 2.5% here in the after hours. Third quarter adjusted EBITDA loss, $73.8 million. That's bigger than the estimated loss of $58.1 million, but they are targeting cash flow positive within the second half of 2023, so maybe that's why there's some optimism, but nonetheless, A busy Wednesday, guys, and a lot of earnings news. What?
Yeah, I wrapping.
I got to go. We got to go. We got lots more to go. All right, guys, that's it for our cross-platform coverage. Radio, TV, YouTube, and Bloomberg Quick Take. We will see you same time, same place tomorrow.
This is Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Masser and Bloomberg Quick Takes Tim Stenovic on Bloomberg Radio.
All right, everybody, a lot going on. I do want to check in with Charlie Pellet following the market action here after the closing bell. Charlie, take it away.
Indeed, turned out to be a down day. The Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ, but lots of headlines today. Binance backing out of the FTX bailout, as you guys were just reporting. Bitcoin today plunged 13.8%. That certainly weighed on sentiment. Also, disappointing earnings today out of the Walt Disney Company. Disney shares plunged today by 13.2%. Bottom line, the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all closed at session lows. A 79-point drop today for the S&P, down 2.1%. The Dow Jones Industrial Average down 646 points, down 2%. NASDAQ down 263, drop there of 2.5%. The 10-year yield 4.07%, with the 2-year yielding 4.57%. Spot gold 17.05 the ounce, down there by 0.4%. West Texas Intermediate crude down 3.7%, 85.63 a barrel. After the closing bell, we heard from Bumble, BMBL on the ticker. Bumble forecasting revenue for the fourth quarter. That guidance did miss the average analyst estimate. After ours, we've got Bumble shares, an online dating service. We've got Bumble plunging by 19%. Again, stocks sinking on crypto and earnings woes, worth repeating.
Charlie Pellet, thank you so much. I just want to update on Beyond Meat because that stock is down now in the after hours. We had seen kind of a pop to the upside, but down about 1.25%. And that makes sense to me because when they talk about the third quarter adjusted EBITDA loss, much larger than forecast, $73.8 million versus an estimated loss of $58.1 million. You're the crypto individual, I feel like, around here. More to come.
More, I mean,
right?
That is the question. I mean, I remember as if it wasn't a few hours ago.
Grandkids a long time ago. Oh, wait, sit tight. We want to go to the White House. President Biden.
Well, we had an election yesterday. And it was a good day, I think, for democracy. And I think it was a good day for America. Excuse me, I'm a little hoarse. Our democracy has been tested in recent years, but with their votes, the American people have spoken and proven once again that democracy is who we are. The states across the country saw a record voter turnout. And the heart and soul of our democracy, the voters, the poll workers, the election officials, they did their job and they fulfilled their duty. And apparently without much interference at all, without any interference, it looks like. And that's a testament, I think, to the American people. While we don't know all the results yet, at least I don't know them all yet, here's what we do know. While the press and the pundits are predicting a giant red wave, it didn't happen. And I know you were somewhat miffed by my obsessive optimism, but I felt good during the whole process. I thought we were going to do fine. While any seat lost is painful, some good Democrats didn't win the last night. Democrats had a strong night. And we lost fewer seats in the House of Representatives than any Democratic president's first midterm election in the last 40 years. And we had the best midterm for governors since 1986. And another thing that we know is that voters spoke clearly about their concerns, about raising costs, the rising costs that they're in, and the need to get inflation down. There's still a lot of people hurting. They're very concerned. And it's about crime and public safety. And they sent a clear and unmistakable message that they want to preserve our democracy and protect the right to choose in this country. And I especially want to thank the young people of this nation who, I'm told, I haven't seen the numbers, voted historic numbers again. And just as they did 2 years ago. They voted to continue addressing the climate crisis, gun violence, their personal rights and freedoms, and the student debt relief. Last night, I was pleased to call Maxwell Frost, a 25-year-old who got elected, I guess the youngest man ever elected to the United States Congress. And I told him I told him that I was the first elected, the second youngest person ever elected to the United States Senate at 29. that I have no doubt he's off to an incredible start and what I'm sure will be a long, distinguished career. And when he's president and they say Joe Biden's out in the outer office, I don't want to say Joe who. But the voters were also clear that they are still frustrated. I get it. I understand it's been a really tough few years in this country for so many people. When I came to office, we inherited a nation with a pandemic raging and an economy that was reeling. And we acted quickly and boldly to vaccinate the country and to create a stable and sustained growth in our economy. Long-term investment to rebuild America itself, our roads, our bridges, our ports, our airports, clean water systems, high-speed internet. And we're just getting started. The interesting thing is that this is all going to really come into clear view for people in the months of January, February, March of next year. It's just getting underway. So I'm optimistic about how the public's going to even be more embracive of what we've done. Historic investments that are leading companies to invest literally hundreds of billions of dollars combined to build semiconductor factories and other advanced manufacturing here in America. It's going to create tens of thousands of good paying jobs. And by the way, a significant number of those jobs are going to be jobs that pay average $126,000, $127,000. You don't need a college degree to get those jobs. And we're dealing with global inflation as a result of the pandemic and Putin's war in Ukraine. We're also handling it better than most other advanced nations in the world. We're lowering gas prices. We're taking on powerful interest to lower prescription drug costs and health insurance premiums and energy bills. After 20 months of hard work, the pandemic no longer controls our lives. It's still a concern, but no longer controls our lives. Our economic policies have created a record 10 million new jobs since I came into office. Unemployment rate is down from 6.4 when I was sworn in to 3.7%, near a 50-year low. And we've done all this while lowering the federal deficit in the 2 years by $1.7 trillion. Let me say it again, $1.7 trillion. No administration has ever cut the deficit that much. And reducing the federal deficit is one of the best things we can do to lower inflation, but while we've made real progress as a nation, I know it's hard for folks to see that progress in their everyday lives. And it's hard to see the results from actions that we took while we have to implement what we've done. But I believe we took the right steps for the country and for the American people. In fact, if you look at the polls, overwhelming majority, I don't look at them much anymore because I'm not quite sure how to read them anymore. I hope you are uncertain as well. The overwhelming majority of American people support the elements of my economic agenda. From rebuilding America's roads and bridges to lowering prescription drug costs to historic investment in tackling the climate crisis to making sure that large corporations begin to pay their fair share in taxes. I'm confident these policies are working and that we're on the right path, and we need to stick with them. All these initiatives take hold as they do, from lead pipes being removed from schools and communities with a resurgence of American manufacturers. It's already created, by the way, 700,000 brand new manufacturing jobs. You've heard me say it ad nauseum. I don't know where it's written. It says we can't be the manufacturing capital of the world. We are now exporting product, not jobs, around the world. People across the country are going to see even more clearly the positive effects on their day-to-day lives. But I still understand why they're hurting right now. So many people are concerned. As I have throughout my career, I'm going to continue to work across the aisle to deliver for the American people. And it's not always easy, but we did it the first term. And I'll be surprised a lot of people that we signed over 210 bipartisan laws since I've become president, and we're revitalizing American manufacturing, gun safety, we did it together, and dozens of laws positively impacting on our veterans. And let me say this, regardless of what the final tally in these elections show, and there's still some counting going on, Republican colleagues, the American people have made clear, I think, that they expect Republicans to be prepared to work with me as well. In the area of foreign policy, I hope we'll continue this bipartisan approach of confronting Russia's aggression in Ukraine. When I return from the G20 meetings in Indonesia with other world leaders, I'm going to invite done in the past in my foreign trips to the White House to discuss how we can work together for the remainder of this year and into the next Congress to advance the economic and national security priorities of the United States. And I'm open to any good ideas. I want to be very clear. I'm not going to support any Republican proposal that's going to make inflation worse. For example, the voters don't want to pay higher prescription costs for drugs. We've cut that now. We're going to kick into gear next year, next calendar year. And I'm not going to walk away from the historic commitments we just made to take on the climate crisis. They're not compromisable issues to me, and I won't let it happen. The voters don't want more taxes for the tax cuts for the super wealthy and biggest corporations. And I'm going to continue to focus on cost cutting for working and middle class families and building an economy from the bottom up and the middle out. I know you're tired of hearing me say that, but I genuinely mean it. That's what makes America grow. The wealthy do very well when the middle class is doing well, and the poor have a way up. And while continuing to bring down the federal deficit. You know, as we look at tax cuts, we should be looking at tax cuts for working people and middle class people, not the very wealthy. They're fine. And if you can go out and be a multimillionaire, that's great. Just pay your fair share. That's all. That's all. Just pay your fair share. It's like those 55 corporations in 2000 that made $40 billion and didn't pay a penny in federal taxes. It's not right. Everybody has an obligation. So now they have to pay a staggering 15%. You all pay more than that for your taxes. So I'm going to keep my commitment that no one earning less than $400,000 a year, and that's a lot of money where I come from, are going to see their federal taxes go up. And I want to be very clear. Under no circumstances will I support the proposal put forward by Senator Johnson and the senator from down in Florida to cut or make fundamental changes in social and interest in the American people first. So let me close with this. On this election season, the American people made it clear. They don't want every day going forward to be a constant political battle. There's too much of that going on. And there's too much that we have to do. The future of America is too promising to be trapped in endless political aspects for America. We need to be looking to the future, not fixated on the past. And that future is bright as can be. We were the only nation in the world that's come out of every crisis stronger than we went into the crisis. And that's a fact. I mean, literally mean that. We've come out stronger than we've gone in. And I've never been more optimistic about America's future than I am today. You know, particularly because of all those young people I talked about, 18 to 30. They're showing up. They're the best educated generation in American history. They're the least prejudiced generation in American history, the most engaged generation in American history, and the most involved. Look, after a long campaign season, I still believe it always have. This is a great nation, and we're great people. And it's never been a good bet to bet against America. Never been a good if we work together. We just need to remember who the hell we are. We're the United States of America. The United States of America. There's nothing beyond our capacity. And I'm pretty well convinced that we're going to be able to get a lot done. Now, I've been given a list of 10 people that I'm supposed to call on. And you're all supposed to ask me one question, but I'm sure you'll ask me more. And so let me start off with a list I've been given. Zeke Miller, Associated Press.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have 2 questions for you. As you mentioned,
How come we never hold you guys the same standard you hold us to? But anyway, go ahead. I'm teasing.
You mentioned that Americans are frustrated, and in fact, 75% of voters say the country is heading into the wrong direction, despite the results of last night. What in the next 2 years do you intend to do differently to change people's opinion of the direction of the country, particularly as you contemplate a run for president in 2024?
Nothing, because they're just finding out what we're doing. The more they know about what we're doing, the more support there is. Do you know anybody who wants us to get rid of the change we made on prescription drug prices and raise prices again? Do you know anybody who wants us to walk away from building those roads and bridges and the internet and so on? I don't know any. I think that the problem is the major piece of legislation we passed, and some of it bipartisan, takes time to be recognized. For example, you got over $1 trillion worth of infrastructure money, but not that many spades have been put in the ground. It's taking time. For example, I was on the phone congratulating a Californian recently, and then someone up in Scranton, Pennsylvania, the congressman who got elected. He said, "Can you help us make sure we're able to have high-speed rail service from Scranton to New York City?" I said, "Yeah, we can. We can. First of all, it'll make it a lot easier, take a lot of vehicles off the road, and we have more money in the pot now, already out there, we voted for, than the entire money we spent on Amtrak to begin with. And it's the same way. For example, I talked about through the campaign that we're going to limit the cost of insulin for seniors to $35 a month instead of $400 a month. Well, it doesn't take effect till next year. So there's a lot of things that are just starting to kick in. And the same way with what we've done in terms of the environmental stuff. It takes time to get it moving. So I'm not going to change. As a matter of fact, you know, there's some things I want to change and add to. For example, we had passed the most bipartisan, we passed the most extensive gun legislation, rational gun policy in 30 years. But we didn't ban assault weapons. I'm going to ban assault weapons. They're going to try like the devil. So I'm not going to change the direction. I said I ran for 3 reasons. I'm going to continue to stay where I am. And I know I fully understand the legitimate concern that what I'm saying is wrong, okay? One is that I said we're going to restore the soul of the country, begin to treat each other with decency, honor, and integrity. And it's starting to happen. People are, the conversations are becoming more normal, becoming more, how can I say it, decent. Second thing I said was I want to build a country from the middle out, the bottom up, and that way everybody does fine. I'm tired of trickle down. Not a whole lot trickles down, but when you trickle down to hardworking folks. And the third thing I know is still very hard. I'm going to do everything in my power to see to reunite the country. It's hard to sustain yourself as a leading democracy in the world if you can't generate some unity. So I'm not going to change anything in any fundamental way.
And just on a different topic, Mr. President, Russia today claimed that it had evacuated the Kherson region and the Kherson city. Do you believe that this is potentially an inflection point?
And it remains to be seen whether or not there will be a judgment made as to whether or not Ukraine is prepared to compromise with Russia. I'm going to be going to the G20. I'm told that President Putin is not likely to be there, but other world leaders are going to be there in Indonesia. And we're going to have an opportunity to see what the next steps may be. Nancy, CBS, Nancy Cordes.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have a few questions. Giving them up. First of all, Republican leader Kevin McCarthy said last night that it is clear we are going to take the House back. Do you think he's probably right about that?
Well, based on what we know as of today, we've lost very few seats for keeping the House, but it's going to be close. And for example, in Nevada, we won all 3 of those seats, contested seats. I went out for each. I spoke for each of those folks, but we won them all. I didn't know that last night, so it's a moving target right now. But it's going to be very close.
Can you describe your relationship with Mr. McCarthy? How often do you speak to him? What do you think of him?
I think he's a Republican leader, and I haven't had much of occasion to talk to him, but I will be talking to him. I think I'm talking to him later today.
When it comes to your legislative agenda, when you were vice president, your legislative agenda basically ran into a brick wall 2 years in when Republicans took control of the House, and that lasted for the rest of the Obama presidency. Is there any way for you to prevent that same fate from happening this time around?
Yes.
If Republicans take control of the House?
Yes, because it's going to be much closer if they take control. If they can't, look, the predictions were, and again, I'm not being critical of anybody who made the predictions. I got it, okay? This is supposed to be a red wave. You were talking about us losing 30 to 50 seats, and this was going to, nowhere near, that's not going to happen. And so there's always enough people on the other team, whether it's Democrat or Republican, that the opposite party can make an appeal to and maybe pick them off to get the help. And so it remains to be seen. But look, I doubt whether or not, for example, all the talk, I'd ask the I don't expect you to answer, but the rhetorical question, do you think that, Senator Johnson is going to move to cut Medicare and Social Security? And if he does, how many Republicans are going to vote for it? So it depends.
And then my final question. Republicans have made it clear that if they do take control of the House, that they want to launch a raft of investigations on day one into your handling of Afghanistan, the border. They want to look into some of your cabinet officials. They want to investigate you. They may even want to investigate your son. What's your message to Republicans who are considering investigating your family, and particularly your son Hunter's business dealings?
Lots of luck in your senior year, as my coach used to say. Look, I think the American public want us to move on and get things done for them. And, I heard that there were, it was reported, whether it's accurate or not, I'm not sure, but it was reported many times that Republicans were saying, and the former president said, how many times are you going to impeach Biden? Impeachment proceeding against Biden. I mean, I think the American people will look at all of that for what it is. It's just almost comedy. I mean, it's, but, look, I can't control what they're going to do. All I can do is continue to try to make life better for the American people. Okay, Phil Mattingly, CNN.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have 37 questions. I'm kidding. Sir, at a fundraiser last month, you said, quote, the rest of the world is looking at this election, both the good guys and the bad guys. You noted you're going to the G20 in a couple days. You'll come face to face with many of those leaders the same moment that your predecessor is considering launching his re-election effort. How should those world leaders, both good guys and bad guys, view this moment both for America and for your presidency?
Well, first of all, these world leaders know we're doing better than anybody else in the world as a practical matter. Notwithstanding the difficulties we have, our economy is growing. You saw the last report, we're still growing at 2.6%. We're creating jobs. We're still in a solid position, and there's not many other countries in the world who are in that position. And I promise you, from the telephone calls I still have and from the meetings I have with other heads of state, they're looking to the United States and saying, how are you doing it? What are you doing? What can we do together? So I think that the vast majority of my colleagues, at least those colleagues who are NATO members, European Union, Japan, South Korea, et cetera, I think they're looking to cooperate and wanting to know how we can help one another. And what was the other question? Oh, I'm sorry.
No. So I think the one way I would follow up on that is you noted that you felt like there was a shift in terms of people being willing to show more decency in this moment. You've often talked about breaking the fever or kind of a transition from this moment that we've faced over the last several years. Do you feel like the election is what represents that? Do you feel like the fever is broken, I guess?
Well, I don't think we're going to break the fever for the super mega Republicans. I mean, but I think they're a minority of the Republican Party. I think the vast majority of the members of the Republican Party, we disagree strongly on issues, but they're decent, honorable people. We have differences of agreement on issues. But they, I work with a lot of these folks in the Senate and the House for a long time, and they're honest and they're straightforward. They're different than mine, but they're decent folks. And so I think that the rest of the world, and a lot of you have covered other parts of the world, and the rest of the world looking at the United States. I guess the best way to say this is to repeat what some of you heard me say before. The first G7 meeting for the public, that's the 7 largest democracies, when I went to right after we got elected in February, after I got sworn in January. And I sat down at a table, round table, with the 6 other world leaders from the European Union and Canada, et cetera, and said, America's back. And one of them turned to me and said, for how long? For how long? It was a deadly earnest question. For how long? And I looked at them, and then another one went on to say, and I'm not going to name them, went on to say, what would you say, Joe, if in fact we went to bed tonight here in England, woke up the next morning and found out that thousands of people had stormed the Parliament of Great Britain, gone down the hall, broken down the doors, 2 cops ended up dying, a number of people injured, and they tried to stop the confirmation of an election. It's not the same situation, obviously, as we have. And he said, what would you think? And I asked a rhetorical question, what would you all think? You'd think England was really in trouble. You'd think democracy was on the edge if that happened in Great Britain. And so that's the way people were looking at us, like, when's this going to stop? Nothing like this has happened since the Civil War. I don't want to exaggerate, but literally, nothing like this has happened since the Civil War. And so what I find is that they want to know, is the United States stable? Do we know what we're about? Are we the same democracy we've always been? Because, look, the rest of the world looks to us. I don't mean that we're always right. But if the United States tomorrow were to, quote, withdraw from the world, a lot of things would change around the world. A whole lot would change. And so they're very concerned that we are still the open democracy we've been, and that we have rules and the institutions matter. And that's the context in which I think that they're looking at, are we back to a place where we are going to accept decisions made by the court, by the Congress, by the government, et cetera?
So the entire genesis of that G7 conversation was tied to your predecessor, who is about to launch another campaign. So how do you reassure them, if that is the reason for their questioning, that the former president will not return, or that his political movement, which is still very strong, will not once again take power in the United States?
Well, we just have to demonstrate that he will not take power by, if he does run, making sure he, under legitimate efforts of our Constitution, does not become the next president again. Steve Reuters, I'm sorry, Steve Howell.
Thank you, sir. How do you interpret last night's results in terms of deciding whether you want to seek another term? Is it now more likely that you will run? And what's going to be your timeline for consideration?
Well, first of all, Jill and I have, and by the way, it's my wife, Jill, who's held a lot more popular than I am in the Democratic Party, too. But at any rate, all kidding aside, our intention is to run again. That's been our intention, regardless of what the outcome of this election was. The fact that we won, I didn't run, the fact that the Democratic Party outperformed anything anyone expected and did better than any off-year presidency since John Kennedy is one that gives everybody like, whew, sigh of relief that the mega Republicans are not taking over the government again, et cetera. And so my judgment of running, when I announce, if I announce, my intention is that I run again, but I'm a great respecter of fate, and this is ultimately a family decision. I think everybody wants me to run, but we're going to have discussions about it. And I don't feel any hurry one way or another to make that judgment, today, tomorrow, or whenever, no matter what my predecessor does.
Early next year, or what's your thinking?
My guess is, I hope Jill and I get a little time to actually sneak away for a week around between Christmas and Thanksgiving. And my guess is it'd be early next year we make that judgment. But it's my plan to do it now. I mean, but, okay, I'm sorry. Karen Travers of ABC Radio.
Thank you, Mr. President. WNBA star Brittany Griner today was moved to a Russian penal colony to serve out her 9-year sentence. Do you have an update right now on her condition? What do you know about that? And does this mark a new phase in negotiations with the Russians to secure her release? Can the U.S. now fully engage in talks on a prisoner swap?
Well, we've been engaging on a regular basis. I've been spending a fair amount of time with her wife about what's going on with her. And my hope is that now that the election is over, that Mr. Putin will be able to discuss with us and be willing to talk more seriously about prisoner exchange. That is my intention. My intention is to get her home. And we've had a number of discussions so far. And I'm hopeful that now that our election is over, there's a willingness to negotiate more specifically with us. Thank you.
And if I can, your press secretary had said that the U.S. government has continued to follow up on that significant offer, but also had proposed alternative potential ways forward with the Russians. Can you tell us what those alternative ways forward are and how Russia has responded to those?
Yes, I can, but I won't. Okay, I can't. I mean, you know, it would not be a wise thing to do in order to see if they would move forward. But it is I'm telling you, I am determined to get her home and get her home safely, along with others, I might add. April Ryan.
Of the GRIO.
Of the GRIO, excuse me, I beg your pardon.
Thank you, sir.
I got it right last time we did this.
Yes, you did. Yes, you did. Mr. President, I have a couple of questions on several issues. One, the Supreme Court. As you know, the Supreme Court has before it the issue of college admissions and affirmative action. What can and are you planning in case of a rollback that is expected? There are legal analysts that say that there will be drastic implications. There are tentacles from this, and they even say that this could impact Brown v. Board, the decision from Brown v. Board.
Well, you know, first of all, I asked our Justice Department to defend the present policy before the Supreme Court. And like a lot of pundits, I'm not prepared to believe that the Supreme Court is going to overrule the existing decision. That's far from certain, and I don't believe that. But number one, what I did to try to change it is object to it before the Supreme Court of the United States, our administration. Number two, there are a number of things that we can and must do to make it. And by the way, this is a case involving an Asian American in terms of getting into school, and whether there's affirmative action makes sense at all from the standpoint of those who are arguing against it. But you know, the fact is that we're also in a circumstance where there's a lot that we can do in the meantime to make sure that there's an access to good education across the board. And that is by doing things that relate to starting education at age 3, formal schooling at age 3, which increases not daycare, but school. All the studies over 10 years show that that increases the prospect of someone making it through 12 years without any difficulty, no matter what the background they come from, by 56%. And I also think that we should be making sure that we have the ability to provide for 2 years of education beyond that, whether it's apprenticeships or community colleges. And we also are in a situation where I think that, for example, I want to make sure a lot of it has to do with finances as well, that we make sure that we have help for people who come from modest means to be able to get to school. You know, the cost of college education has increased 4-fold. And it used to be that a Pell Grant would cover something like 70% of the college tuition. Now it covers significantly less than that. So I want to increase the Pell Grants as well. But let's see what the Supreme Court decides. And I am hopeful, and our team and the lawyers who argued for us are not nearly as certain as the people you quoted as saying it's going to be overruled.
Next question, sir. The issue is inflation. The GRIO and KFF conducted a study of black voters that said inflation was the #1 issue. and we saw it in this midterm election. What can you promise concretely in these next 2 years that will help turn the pocketbook for the better in the midst of staving off a recession?
Well, a number of things. First of all, black unemployment is almost cut in half under my administration just since I began. More black businesses have opened up, small businesses, than ever before. We're now in a situation where we're providing, through the Small Business Administration, down payments for people buying homes, because most people accumulate wealth in the value of their home. Most middle-class families are like mine. My dad bought a home, didn't have it, just scraped together to get a home. By the time he was able to retire, he had built up equity in the home. That's how most people do that. But what I can't do is I can't guarantee that we're going to be able to get rid of inflation, but I do think we can. We've already brought down the price of gasoline about $1.20 a gallon across the board, and I think that the oil companies are really doing the nation a real disservice. They've made, 6 of them made over $100 billion in the last quarter in profit. $100 billion. In the past, if they had done the two things that they have done before, one, invest in more refineries and producing more product, and or passing on the rebates to the gas stations. They sell the oil at a cheaper rate than they are selling it now, not taking advantage, and that lowers the price of the total gallon of gas because that gets passed on. So there's a whole lot of things that we can do that are difficult to do, but we're going to continue to push to do them. And the other thing is that one of the things that makes a gigantic difference is what are the costs that exist in the average family and the average black community. One, prescription drug cost. Well, we're driving those down precipitously beginning next year. And, I'll bet a lot of people in the African-American and Caucasian community that need to take insulin for diabetes. Well, we're going to be reducing that cost. They're not going to pay more than $35 for the insulin instead of average of $400. And I can go down the list of the things that my dad used to say it a different way. At the end of the month, the things you have to pay for, from your mortgage to food on the table, the gasoline in the automobile, do you have enough money to do it? And when it's done, do you have anything left over? And medical bills are a big piece of that, particularly in the African-American community and the poorer communities. They need help. And so we're driving down all of those costs, and we've already passed the legislation to do that. It's just taking effect. So there's a lot of things we can do to affect the things that people need on a monthly basis to reduce their inflation, their cost of living. But I am optimistic because we continue to grow and at a rational pace. We are not anywhere near a recession right now in terms of the growth, but I think we can have what most economists call a soft landing. I'm convinced that we're going to be able to gradually bring down prices so that they, in fact, end up with us not having to move into a recession to be able to get control of inflation.
And Mr. President, last question on humanity. Everybody else got some. You're coming.
Okay, go ahead.
Last question on humanity. Sir, you can't legislate and you can't executive order out the issue of empathy or the lack thereof in the midst of this rhetoric, this heated political rhetoric. What's next?
Part of what I think leadership requires, and I hope I meet the standard, is letting people know you understand their problem. Again, my dad used to have an expression. He said, I don't expect the government to solve my problems, but I expect them at least know what they are, understand them. And like a lot of you, we've been very fortunate as a family, but we've also been through a lot of fairly tough times. And I've had the great advantage of having a family to get through them. When my first wife and daughter were killed when a tractor trailer broadsided them and killed my wife and killed my first wife and killed my daughter, And my 2 boys are expected to die. It took the jaws of life 3 hours to get them out there on top of their dead mother and dead sister. I understand what that pain's like. And when Jill and I lost Bo after a year in Iraq, winning the Bronze Star Conspicuous Service Medal, a major in the United States military, came home with stage 4 glioblastoma because he lived about between 200 and 500 yards from a burn pit that's 10 feet deep and as big as a football field, burning every toxic waste you could find. You know, I think that we understand what it's like to lose family members, mothers, fathers to cancer. All of you been through that kind of thing. We've been fortunate, though. We've had each other. We've had strong families, Jill's sisters, my brothers, my sister. And so what we can do to deal with that empathy is make sure there's help available. Make sure there's people who are there to help, whether they are psychologists or whether they're medical doctors or whether they're social workers, to be there to help just hold a hand. And for example, we can do an awful lot for a lot of families, the families you're talking about, if we reinstate this child tax credit. It cut child poverty by 40% when it was in place. I couldn't get it passed the second time around. So there's a lot we can do. And the empathy is not just talking about it, it's communicating to people you genuinely understand. And I hope a lot of people don't understand because I don't want people having to know the pain. But the second piece of that is let them know that you are there to help. You're there to help. And one of the things I've talked with Vivek Murthy about, and a lot of you have written about it, and you've written it well about it, is the need for mental health care in America. You know, when we got elected, there were something like, I don't know, 2, 3, 5 million people who gotten their COVID shots. Well, in the meantime, I got over 220 million people, all 3 shots. But in the meantime, what happened? We lost over 1 million dead. 1 million dead. I read one study that for those 1 million people, they had 9 people who were each one had averaged 9 people close to them. A relative, someone they're married to, a child, someone close. The impact has been profound. Think of all the people, think of all your children and your grandchildren who didn't have that senior prom, who didn't have that graduation party, who didn't have all the things we had that we took for granted, that impact on their psyche. So there's a lot we have to do. And empathy reflects itself not just in what a person demonstrates they understand, of knowing what people need and helping to make it happen. And we're trying to do that. And a lot of Republicans trying to do it too. I don't mean this is a partisan thing. A lot of people are trying to do it because they know we got a problem. Okay, excuse me. These 10 questions are really going quickly. Well, I've got to meet with some of my, talk to some of the Republican leadership soon. But anyway, Jenny Leonard, Bloomberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. 2 questions. One, shifting back to your trip to Asia. When you meet with President Xi Jinping of China, will you tell him that you're committed to defending Taiwan militarily? And what are you hoping to get out of this meeting that will make it a success? Are you willing to make any concessions to him?
Well, look, I'm not willing to make any fundamental concessions because what I've told him in the beginning, and this is I've spent over 78, I think they told me, hours with him so far, 67 in